To create SQL VM on Azure, go to All Services, search for SQL Deployment, then under SQL Server choose one with free SQL license option and click on Create. On next screen, fill out all the details required to create a VM as shown in my other video. You will get one extra page while creating SQL VM related to SQL Server setting. Choose whether you want to manage SQL Server from other machines using Internet or from ones within VNet, or keep it local to the VM. Change the default port for security purpose. Enable SQL authentication if you want to access SQL Management Studio using SQL credentials, which should be same as that of VM, or you can use Windows authentication only. We will not integrate Key Vault for this lab exercise. Keep the default storage and instance settings. We cannot choose hybrid benefit here as we are using image, which is free. We will keep automatic patching time intact. Automatic backup is different than vaulted backup that we will discuss later in this video. If enabled, backups are stored on blobs in storage account and not recovery service vault. Maximum retention allowed is 90 days in this case. We will keep advanced analytics option disabled for now and click on Create. We have got one SQL Server created as part of this deployment from where you can manage or change SQL Server settings provided earlier, and one VM to which we can RDP. In NSG settings of VM, we will add RDP rule and connect to the VM. Now open SQL Server Management Studio. We will connect using Windows authentication method for now. We can see few default system databases have been created. Let us create backup database manually. Now within newly created database, create table and add columns to it. Let us proceed and configure SQL Server in Azure VM Backup in our vault now. Go to Vault, Backup, select that workload is running in Azure and SQL Server, click on Discover. Select the SQL VM from list of discovered VMs and click on Discover DB. We can see a banner which says Geo Redundancy is enabled on Vault. However, as we have started using Vault already, we cannot change it now, which is okay, as we would be deleting backup copy in this lab session at the end. However, in real case, ensure that required redundancy is selected before proceeding with any configuration in Vault. We can now see from View Details that 4 DBs have been discovered successfully from selected VM. Go to Configure Backup, select Exiting Policy or Create New Policy. We will create new one with minimum retention of 7 days for full backup and deselect weekly, monthly, yearly retention. We don't need differential backup for now. We will change log backup frequency to least possible value, that is 15 minutes. Click on Add DB, select DB for which you want to configure backup. Turn on Auto Protect if required, which would by default take backup of all existing DBs and DBs that would be added in future. Note that status should be ready before proceeding or resolve any existing issues before. As backup configuration is in progress, let us check backup Private Endpoint's DNS configuration, which is being used instead of public network. We can see that there are few additional entries of DNS in backup DNS zone, and few more would get created related to queue after we trigger our first backup. You can compare the DNS entries with the ones present initially captured in my another video where we created Private Endpoint. We can see one SQL backup configured from backup items, and it says initial backup is pending. You can wait for backup to trigger at scheduled time or trigger a manual backup. Provide date till when you want to retain the manual backup copy and initiate it. You can check progress of backup from backup jobs. We can see that one backup that we just triggered is in progress and another one initiated automatically which failed, as only one backup can run at one time. We can see that backup got completed. We can even see backup data size and its activity ID, which is unique for every job. We will now reject the private endpoint and see that next backup job that we trigger fails with connectivity issue, which confirms that traffic was being routed over Microsoft backup network and not on public network. As the backup is running, let us see restore options that are available. As you can see, you can restore DB to alternate or same location or restore it as file. Select the restore point or backup copy to restore from. In advanced setting, choose if you want no recovery mode, where DB would not come online after restore on its own if we enable it. You can choose option to overwrite DB if present in mentioned path for recovery with same name. We can see the backup failed now as expected, as we don't have enabled private endpoint and public access is denied. Note that we cannot approve the rejected private endpoint now. If want to, you will have to create new one. We will delete it and allow public access for now. Note that you can have private endpoint enabled and approved, but backup failing with connectivity issue as it doesn't allow Azure Active Directory traffic over it. It still needs to go over internet for authentication for backup to succeed. So even if you have private endpoint in place, allow outbound traffic on port 443 to AAD service tag in NSG attached to SQL Server. Let us delete the backup data now. You can either stop backup and retain existing copies or delete it as per your requirement. We can see that operation succeeded, however, we can still see one backup item as it is in soft delete state. To permanently delete it, undelete backup data, disable soft delete and delete it again. As we can see, backup data has been deleted, however, SQL Server is still registered with Test Vault. So you won't be able to discover the server in any other server. You will have to unregister it from backup infrastructure before. So this was all about SQL Server backup over private endpoint.